When Laura walked into her own store, the salesperson kicked her out, not knowing who she really was. This moment marked the beginning of her battle against racism, even hidden within her own business. How she responded will surprise even the most seasoned. But let's start from the very beginning. Laura walked down the street, confident in herself and her decision. She had just purchased a well-known clothing brand, and today she decided to personally visit one of its stores. This move was not just business, but personal. She dreamed of creating a space where everyone felt accepted. But as soon as she stepped into the store, Laura felt a cold, almost physical barrier descend upon her. The store was old, with dim lighting, and the air had a faint smell of dust. The salespeople were busy with their own tasks, and customers were few. Laura passed the display windows, noticing how a few people's eyes slid over her with curiosity and suspicion. A sense of discomfort immediately arose in her heart, but she held it in, knowing that today she had a lot to change. She approached the counter where Bob, an elderly salesman, was slowly arranging merchandise. Laura smiled and, trying to be friendly, asked, "Excuse me, do you have any new collections?" Bob looked up, and her skin color seemed to immediately put him on edge. He slowed his movements, as though studying her from a distance, and then quietly said, "Sorry, we don't have the right sizes. You'd better try somewhere else." Laura was momentarily stunned. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Bob's tone, his wariness, and even his reluctance to help, all of it made it clear that she was not a welcome customer here. "I'm the new owner of this brand," Laura replied calmly, feeling the weight of her words. But instead of an apology or surprise, Bob simply shook his head. "I don't know how that's possible, but we don't have anything suitable for you," he said, as if he hadn't heard her explanation. Laura felt a cold sweat run down her back. This was more than just discomfort. It was blatant discrimination. But instead of letting her emotions run wild, she restrained herself and, turning silently, left the store. Behind her, she heard quiet whispers. On the street, Laura exclaimed in fury, "What the hell?" She got into her car, but inside she felt a storm brewing. This wasn't an accident. This was part of a system. Her system. Laura couldn't calm down. The incident at the store kept replaying in her head, like a memory that wouldn't let her rest. This couldn't just be a misunderstanding. It was a manifestation of a system. She took out her phone and wrote a post on Instagram, briefly describing what had happened to her and how she had been kicked out of the store. Laura added hashtags: racism, in business, and #human rights. She knew she wouldn't stay silent, but she didn't expect how quickly her words would resonate. The post gained traction immediately. In the comments, dozens of messages began to appear, everything from support to outrage. People wrote that she shouldn't tolerate such behavior and that change was necessary. Some claimed the store had long been in need of a makeover. Laura felt how public opinion was gaining weight, but it wasn't enough. The next day, she decided to take action. She researched the store's history and found out that Bob had worked there for many years and was part of the old team, which adhered to outdated, biased standards. Laura quickly reached out to the manager of employee training to inquire about inclusivity training, and then sent a letter to the director expressing her concerns about the behavior of the staff. But the most important step was that she decided to confront Bob in person. Laura knew that firing him wasn't enough. She needed to make him understand that his behavior would not go unpunished. She returned to the store, despite her anger, and approached the counter where Bob was once again arranging items. He didn't recognize her at first, but as soon as he saw her, his face went pale. Laura didn't hesitate. "I'm the new owner of this brand," she said calmly, her confidence unshaken. "I need to speak with you." He fell silent, confusion, and then wariness spreading across his face. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to regain control of the conversation. Laura stood firm, her gaze steady. "I want you to understand that your behavior is unacceptable. Not only have you offended me, but you've also disrespected the very idea of the brand I now represent. Views like yours have no place in our team. I'm going to take action, and this is just the beginning." He tried to justify himself, but Laura cut him off. "I know this is part of the old culture, but it won't fly anymore. Your actions will have consequences. Bob simply nodded silently, realizing that his excuses wouldn't help him. Laura turned and left, confident that her statement about fairness would be heard. Soon, she knew this situation would reach far beyond the store. A few hours after her conversation with Bob, Laura sat in her office, checking the news feeds and social media comments. Her post about racism in the store continued to gain popularity. Comments of condemnation, support, and discussion flooded in. Many urged her to take further action, with some even offering legal advice. Laura knew the situation had already escalated beyond a personal conflict, but that wasn't all. In the evening, she received several messages from local journalists interested in her story. One asked if she was willing to give an interview, and she agreed. Laura understood that the media could be a powerful weapon in her fight. The next day, her story was published in several news outlets, and a video of her visit to the store filmed by someone already had millions of views. The city was buzzing. Some supported Laura, others condemned her actions, claiming she was just trying to destroy a business. But the important thing was the attention her story had garnered. Laura realized that her fight for justice would not only take place within her company, but also on a broader scale. Meanwhile, the situation at the store intensified. Employees began to whisper among themselves, and Bob, realizing his actions had become public, started to get nervous. He couldn't hide that his behavior had attracted attention. Workers began discussing how this would affect their own positions, with some even asking whether Bob's firing would be part of the company's reform. Laura didn't wait long. She organized a meeting with the CEO of the chain to discuss the next steps. At first, she tried to stay calm, but when the conversation turned to Bob and his behavior, she could no longer hold back. "We cannot allow such an atmosphere to persist in our brand," she said. "This is not just the mistake of one person. It's a systemic problem, and it needs to be addressed at every level." The CEO paused for a moment, then admitted that the situation was more serious than they had thought. He suggested firing Bob, but Laura insisted on a deeper approach. She demanded that the entire network undergo mandatory inclusivity and anti-racism training. Laura also insisted that the leadership participate in this program. When Laura returned to the store, her plan was already in motion. She proposed to the management that they change internal policies, improve working conditions for employees, and implement regular training sessions on fighting racism. Later that day, an official statement was posted on the brand's website, condemning discrimination in all its forms and pledging to change their policies. It was soon announced that Bob had been fired, but the most important thing was that Laura didn't stop there. A few days later, she began meeting with local human rights organizations to develop a strategy that would address the root causes of the problem. All the while, the situation with Bob continued to evolve in public consciousness. Local media kept a close eye on developments, and Laura realized that her actions would not only change her company, but also influence broader societal processes. Now, her goal was not just to punish one employee, but to change the system that allowed such things to happen. After Bob's dismissal, the situation in the city continued to develop. Laura's story of racism in her store became a hot topic on social media and in the press. People expressed their support, and articles began to appear about the importance of changing outdated corporate norms. Laura realized that her fight wasn't just confined to her company. She was about to face much bigger challenges. She began implementing her plan. Mandatory inclusivity training became a part of every store's operations. Laura personally participated in the training, emphasizing the importance of adhering to new standards. She demanded that every employee go through a program on combating bias and respecting differences. Employees had to sign a commitment to follow these new principles. Laura actively took part in this process, meeting with the staff, explaining how it was important to change not only corporate rules, but also public consciousness. But change always meets resistance. In one of the stores where Bob had worked for many years, employees who were influenced by him began to sabotage the new initiatives. Some openly expressed their dissatisfaction. Laura didn't hesitate and personally visited the store to meet with the team. "If you're not willing to support the new values of the company, that's your choice. she said firmly. But if you want to stay, you must change your attitude towards every person. After that meeting, things began to change. Those who didn't support the new principles left the company, and in their place, new employees who shared Laura's values were hired. This was a significant step in her fight for justice and equality. However, a new twist came when one of Bob's former colleagues filed a lawsuit, demanding compensation for wrongful dismissal. This became a legal challenge for Laura, turning the issue into something not just corporate, but public. Laura didn't compromise. "We are acting within the law, and I'm confident that the truth will prevail," she said in an interview with the press. "We are creating an inclusive, open company, and that's non-negotiable."